I am so incredibly excited to guide you through today's topic. We're going to dive right in because today we are taking a strictly analytical look at one of the most famous, highly documented, and frankly, absolutely terrifying cases in all of paranormal history. Yep, we're talking about the Annabelle doll investigation. We're going to break down the whole shebang, the timeline, the psychological manipulation, and the exact investigative methods they used to finally contain it. But before we get into the weeds, I really want you to consider something. What happens when a simple act of compassion actually invites a diabolical entity straight into your home? Like, how does feeling pity for what you think is a lonely 7-year-old spirit snowball into a highly dangerous paranormal crisis? Well, that's exactly the core of the psychological trap we're exploring today.
Let's start with Section 1, an innocent gift turned sinister.
You know, the timeline of this case is actually really fascinating. The doll itself, it wasn't inherently evil. The Raggedy Ann character was created way back in 1915 by Johnny Gruelle for his daughter, and they started mass-producing them in the 1920s. Fast forward almost 50 years to 1970, and an antique version of this exact doll gets scooped up from a vintage shop by a mom. She gives it as a birthday and nursing school graduation gift to her daughter, Donna. At the time, it was just a sweet, nostalgic piece of decor, literally just a rag doll.
But almost immediately, things started getting really weird. The initial signs of infestation were kind of subtle. Donna and her roommate, Angie, would leave the doll sitting up, and then they'd return to find it just lying down. Then it escalated to moving from the bed to chairs, and eventually, this thing was relocating entirely, like moving from the living room sofa all the way into Donna's bedroom, even though the doors were completely shut. Now, at first, the girls relied heavily on psychological denial. I mean, wouldn't we all? They just blamed it on fatigue, stress from nursing school, or simple forgetfulness.
Which brings us to Section 2, escalation and physical attacks.
So, out of nowhere, the roommates start finding these small notes scattered around the apartment with this creepy, childlike handwriting on them, pleading, "Help us." And what makes this truly chilling? The messages were written on parchment paper. That's a very specific type of baking paper that Donna and Angie didn't even own. The entity was actually manifesting physical objects just to get their attention.
And then, the haunting escalated visually. One evening, Donna came home to find the doll had moved to her bed again. But this time, there was this red liquid, literally resembling blood, just suddenly seeping from the doll's chest and hands. There was absolutely no explainable source for it. This visceral, physical manifestation completely shattered their denial. It was the final straw that pushed a terrified Donna to finally seek out paranormal help.
Now, here is an absolutely crucial point. Who they asked for help. They brought in a medium, but honestly, that visit took a devastating psychological toll. The medium claimed the doll was inhabited by Annabelle Higgins, a 7-year-old girl whose body was supposedly found on the land before the apartment complex was even built. The medium said the spirit just wanted to be loved and asked to stay. Well, Donna, being a compassionate nursing student, felt deep empathy for this little girl, so she made a fatal error. She gave the spirit verbal permission to stay inside the doll. But, as you can probably guess, giving permission definitely didn't bring peace. Instead, it unleashed violence, specifically targeting their friend, Lou, who, by the way, had always hated the doll. Lou began suffering from these horrific, recurring nightmares of the doll actually climbing up his body and choking him. Then, during the day, he heard rustling in Donna's empty room. When he went to investigate, he was struck by this sudden, severe chest pain. When he looks down, his shirt was stained with blood, and he found 7 hot, burning scratch marks right on his chest, 3 vertical and 4 horizontal. This was undeniable proof that the entity was deeply hostile, and it finally prompted the group to contact the church.
Moving on to Section 3, the Warrens' investigation methods.
Enter Ed and Lorraine Warren. Father Hagen, recognizing the severe spiritual danger they were in, contacted his superior, Father Cook, who immediately brought in the warrants. Now, they had perfectly complementary skill sets. Ed was a self-taught demonologist focused on the analytical and historical aspects of a case, while Lorraine was a clairvoyant and light trance medium who could visually and emotionally read spiritual energies.
Let's look at Section 4, Spiritual versus Diabolical Entities.
The Warrens immediately set the record straight. They explained that while human spirits might attach to people or specific locations, they absolutely do not possess inanimate objects like dolls. Diabolical, or demonic, entities, on the other hand, manipulate inanimate objects to create illusions. So the doll was never alive. Not ever. It was being moved by a dark force alongside it, and its ultimate goal was never to just hang out in a doll. Its goal was human possession. Let's actually walk through the Warrens' specific three-step demonic manipulation strategy. It's like a dark playbook. Step 1. Infestation. The entity moves objects just to grab the victim's attention and spark curiosity. Step 2. Eliciting sympathy. When the victim starts seeking answers, the entity pretends to be a harmless, tragic child. And Step 3. Gaining permission. By preying on the victim's empathy, the entity tricks them into granting it permission to stay. Donna fell perfectly into this psychological trap, totally unwittingly opening the door for the entity to eventually attempt possessing one of them. Which leads us into Section 5, Containment and the Occult Museum. So, the first step of containment wasn't just grabbing the doll and running. No, Father Cook was brought in to perform a rigorous official apartment blessing. This was absolutely crucial. It wasn't just your standard exorcism of an object. It was specifically meant to safely sever the entity's spiritual hold on the girl's living space and forcefully inject protective, positive energy right back into their home. Once the apartment was finally cleared, Ed and Lorraine took the doll. But guys, that car ride home was highly suspenseful. Ed specifically avoided the highways, knowing that the intense negative energy posed a massive risk at high speeds. And his instincts were totally right. Every single time they hit a curve, the car violently swerved, risking a fatal crash. Eventually, it got so bad that Ed had to pull over, reach into his black bag, and neutralize the doll's power by dousing it in holy water and making the sign of the cross, just so they could safely make it home. And where exactly did it go? It was taken straight to the Warren Occult Museum. This was a dedicated, highly secure facility built right in the basement of the Warrens' own home. Because their house was constantly being blessed, they believed it could safely contain those dark energies. The museum was established specifically to house highly dangerous artifacts used in diabolical practices. Items like cursed idols, possessed mares, and satanic relics. And right there in the center, Annabelle was locked inside a specially built sealed wooden case. But of course, the danger didn't just magically end once it was locked away. Sometime later, a visiting priest named Father Jason Bradford was hanging out at the Warrens' home. After hearing the story, he completely mocked the artifact's power. He actually picked up the doll and said, "You're just a rag doll, Annabelle, you can't hurt anyone," and then carelessly threw it into a chair. Ed Warren immediately warned him that it was a terrible, terrible mistake to challenge it. And tragically, Ed was right. We have a really grim resolution to this specific event. Just hours after blatantly dismissing and mocking the contained artifact, Father Jason Bradford was involved in a devastating, fatal car crash on his way home. It was a terrifying testament to the entity's lingering, immense power. It basically proved that even when contained behind glass, the danger was still incredibly real. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to chew on. We saw how easily the roommates psychologically denied the reality right in front of them, just passing off demonic manipulation as a quirky antique. So if an innocent, mass-produced rag doll can be manipulated by a highly intelligent, diabolical force to completely destroy a home's peace, what other everyday objects might be hiding unseen, dangerous energies right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.